how the federal shutdown affects supply chains, what's in store for peak season, and the rocky road of the trucking sector. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by Duravant Integrated Solutions. Duravant Integrated Solutions brings precision and efficiency to every stage of your operation. Leveraging equipment from 4 leading brands, FMH Conveyors, QC Conveyors, NPI Sorters, and WolfTech, they streamline handling, routing, and sorting systems that help your warehouse or distribution center achieve peak performance every step of the way. Visit them at duravant.com. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, the federal shutdown is in its 3rd week now with no end in sight. Beyond the politics of each party blaming the other for failing to fund the government, there are real repercussions that affect many aspects of American life, including our supply chains. To find out how this latest disruption is adding even more uncertainty and how our supply chain should respond is Ben with today's guest. Ben?
Thanks, Dave. Real repercussions is right. As we all know from following recent headlines, the federal government shutdown began on October 1st. That's more than 2 weeks now as we record this. For everyday citizens and consumers, that can mean impacts like delayed paychecks for armed service members, as well as TSA and ICE agents, closed doors at national parks or museums, and cut funding for things like nutrition programs for low-income women and children. But what does it mean for supply chain professionals? Here with us today to talk about that topic is our guest, Frank Kenney, who is Director of Industry Strategy at Cleo. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Frank, to begin with, could you give us a quick description of what Cleo does and how the company fits into this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Supply chain is all about buying things and selling things and shipping the things that you sell and then getting paid for them. It's an orchestration, a symphony. What Clio does is it helps companies automate all of those processes, and it helps companies operationalize all those processes. And basically what that means is we help companies manage and connect all of the aspects of their supply chain. And we do that using integration. We do that using business process management. We do that by helping folks connect on very, very simple levels and very, very complex levels for detailed collaboration. So we help make the supply chain work.
Gotcha. It sounds like you definitely have a viewpoint over our subject here then.
Oh, yeah.
Now we've been living through an era, of course, with many disruptions,
Mm-hmm.
even before this shutdown ever came, with their regional wars and missiles in the Red Sea and tariff threats and immigration raids and the pandemic before that. So, is this shutdown just one more disruption, or is this any different?
It's just one more disruption. It's a data point, right? The only certainty is uncertainty. And so what we're seeing companies have to do is prepare themselves for agility and build for agility, build for the disruption. And that's a little different, Ben, than how companies only kind of looked at demand and looked at supply and maybe a hurricane every once in a while or some political upheaval in some land far, far away. That's not the case anymore. Every day you're looking at your supply chain and you're looking at all of the triggers and all of the points of light to see, well, what type of disruption are we going to get today? Because not every disruption is publicized, and it's not as highly viewed as the tariff threats or the shutdown. Case in point, the non-domicile CDL issue that's coming from the Department of Transportation that basically says if you can't drive, if you don't have a residency in the United States. That limits the amount of time that you can drive. Ben, what that's done is that's taken so much capacity out of the market that the prices will go up because there's less trucks on the road, because there's less drivers. Boom, disruption. So at the same time, we are managing through a huge amount of consumers that can't consume because they're not getting paychecks. And we can talk about the air traffic controllers not manning their stations, and we can talk about what that means for customs and what that means for all types of port operations and everything. But if we get to the heart of it, we have a very substantial amount of American consumers that don't have the money to consume. As we start to get into, we're just about a month away from the holiday season. And that becomes very, very scary to retailers. That becomes very, very scary to the manufacturers that sell to the retailers and the trucking companies that move things in between and the warehouses that store those things. But at the end of the day, when you think about what's happening in the boardroom of the chief supply chain officer, they've got a whiteboard, and what they're doing is executing their plans for disruption, their plans for agility. And that's what we see companies do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So agility to deal with the disruption, whatever it may be. So whatever it may be in this case, can you tell us briefly about sort of how cutting off federal spending specifically affects
Mhm.
supply chains?
If you think about air cargo, right, we think about air traffic control and we think about people flying. Well, the flying of humans from point A to point B is not really where the airlines make their money. They make their money carrying cargo. And this starts to, if you have less planes in the air and delayed takeoff, delayed landings because of air traffic controllers, just for an instance, now you really start to see what that impact is on the supply chain and a direct impact to fulfillment on the supply chain, and start mixing in tariffs and the expense of what it takes to bring things in from other countries. And now you have less people to do the checking and you have less air traffic controllers. It is an interesting wrinkle that is causing detours. It's going to cause new routes in how we bring things into the country, how we get things from point A to point B. And that's not even talking about the infrastructure. So you would think you would turn to railroads, but there still has to be federal workers for infrastructure and just everything in between. So expect delays and expect to spend more to get the same product from point A to point B.
This is a broad question, but would that sort of affect all supply chains the same way? Or I imagine that some industries or verticals might be more vulnerable to feeling those kind of effects.
When you look at logistics and outside of very specific refrigerated trucking or flatbed trucking for construction, when you just look at dry van and you look at just carrying goods, what you'll find is that a lot of the logistics companies will start to switch who they're contracted with or what type of things that they're carrying. So maybe you're carrying things to retailers and you're not going to carry things to retailers. You're going to carry more of the upstream, the raw goods, the raw materials that are going to go to a manufacturer to be fabricated into something. So part of a good agility plan is to kind of switch where you focus. And that could be switching the lanes that you leverage. That could be switching the type of cargo, the type of loads that you're going to take, and where those loads are ultimately going to go. You may see less logistics volume going to distribution centers and going back into the stores. You may see more of that volume start to shift into going to warehouses from manufacturers or going from warehouses of raw goods to the manufacturers, etc. So it's a shift in what I'm carrying and a shift where I'm carrying it. But logistics companies are very resilient, and they've learned over the last, I'm going to say COVID was the real kind of jump off, but we can go back into some of the economic uncertainty in 2018, et cetera. But certainly since COVID, what the logistics industry has done is it's learned how to adjust. It's learned how to make the money wherever they possibly can.
A great point. And we just have a minute or so left, but I had a couple more interesting things I wanted to ask. These issues that you've been describing so well here, will that last only as long as the shutdown lasts, or might there be ripples that last longer?
Long tail. There's always a long tail. You know, we saw right before the shutdown, we saw Amazon and Walmart doing the specials, the fall specials, and what that is that's almost an extension of the holiday season. It's the big retailers trying to double down, and doing it so early. That means that the long tail of that, we started seeing volume moving in the summer for this extended holiday. That's what ends up happening. If this starts to move into the holiday, then you'll start to see a lot of specials and a lot of retailers doing some interesting things in January that, Ben, we've never seen. And so what that means is, instead of the Christmas season starting early, the Christmas season may end late. And that's how those things start to move.
Really interesting. To wrap things up here, Frank, in a few words, you talk with clients a lot. What advice do you give them on how to deal with this? I'm guessing agility might be at the top of the list.
Yeah, the biggest advice that I can give folks is create business processes to connect with different partners, to connect with different buyers, and be able to push a button to turn those processes on. With tariffs, it was, well, make sure that you can kind of switch which country you're going to source from based on the tariff policy of that day, and it may be Vietnam, or it may be South Korea, or maybe Laos, or it may be China, and it may bounce between. You may be bringing things in through Port of Los Angeles, and maybe you have to switch and carry things through the overland from Canada or from Mexico, or starting to leverage East Coast ports a little bit more. You're going to need to be able to, as simple as flick a switch, and have to work with a whole new set of logistics providers, et cetera. Build those systems, build those processes, test those processes, do a few dry runs, and then have the fortitude to hit the button when you need to hit the button, Ben.
Sounds like strong advice. We really appreciate, Frank, your being here with us on the show today.
Thank you for having me on, Ben.
Our guest this week has been Frank Kenney from Cleo. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Frank and Ben. Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Victoria, the peak holiday season used to traditionally start around Thanksgiving weekend, but if you look at stores, I think we're almost there already. And you wrote this week about what shoppers have on their wish list this year as far as it affects the supply chain aspects of their gifts. What are they saying?
Well, they're a little bit worried and concerned, actually, and this echoes much of what Ben and Frank were just talking about in terms of uncertainty. Today's uncertain economic conditions are weighing heavy on consumers, with many saying they are worried about affording gifts this holiday season. At the same time, consumers are also saying that accurate delivery promises are paramount for any holiday purchases they do make. And this is according to a survey of 2,000 U.S. consumers that was conducted earlier this year by supply chain technology platform Narvar. The company released the survey results this week, and nearly half said they are concerned about affording those holiday gifts. Now, together, the economic pressures and the need for clearly stated and accurate delivery times is putting new pressure on retailers to meet shipping expectations. Commenting on the survey results, Narvar's president of customer strategy, David Morin, said that price and promotions may draw consumers in during peak season, but what secures the sale and what actually earns loyalty beyond the season is the confidence that a gift will arrive exactly when it's promised.
Yeah, it seems that those delivery dates can be real deal breakers. Did the survey put any statistics behind those statements?
That's right. And yes, more than half of the survey respondents, 53%, said that estimated delivery dates will influence their choice of a retailer. And 56% said that accurate estimated delivery dates increase their likelihood to purchase again. On top of that, the accuracy of those delivery dates outranks shipping costs when consumers are shopping. All of this boils down to trust and transparency. In addition to trusting that a delivery will arrive on time, consumers responding to the survey also said that they want clarity into promotions and policies. 62% said that clear Black Friday and Cyber Monday discounts will determine their purchases, while 57% said they want shipping and return policies visible on retailer websites.
Yeah, anymore, I would think that those wishes are pretty much normal customer expectations. So they're pretty much, I think, just table stakes today.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
And Ben, you reported this week about business conditions in trucking markets, and it seems success often depends on what sector of trucking they're in. Can you explain more?
Yeah, I'm glad to. And that's right. We often talk about the challenges hitting the trucking sector in recent quarters. It's been in a freight recession for something like 3 years now, which generally means there are too many trucks for not enough freight, so that the rates that drivers can charge are super low. But there's more to the picture than that. This week we saw a report that shed a little light there. In a nutshell, business conditions are very different depending if you're in the full truckload sector, less than truckload, or parcel. That comes from the report that was produced by AFS Logistics and TD Cowen. In that report, AFS's CEO, Andy Dyer, said that while the initial shock and awe of high-profile tariff announcements has subsided from earlier this year, businesses continue to grapple with the effects of shifting policies. And he said that we're in year 3, as we said, of an unusually long downward freight cycle, and carriers are relying on hard-won lessons of the past to prioritize profitability and just to hang on in a soft environment.
That's very interesting. Did the report say exactly how those different sectors are coping, Ben?
Right. To get to the bottom line here, it had a lot of statistics, but I'll give you the takeaway from the report for each one. So they said that parcel carriers have, quote, made their own luck by basically raising prices. They've added pricing changes, applying things like ground fuel surcharge rates that have run higher than actual diesel fuel increases. They've added surcharge structures specially to the holiday season. That's an annual thing, of course, but it's bigger than usual. And one shift that's interesting, they've moved away from traditional package measurement estimates, which is how you set a rate for how to carry a certain box, to a new model that rounds up instead of rounding down to set the rates by the size of each box. Their example was if a box is 11.2 inches on one side, they would round that up to 12 instead of down to 11. In less than truckload, the report said that carriers have continued to flex their pricing power because they're actually in better shape. They have some leverage, and they've held the cost per shipment steady at elevated levels that have been around since mid-2023 for 9 straight quarters now. However, in truckload, they continue to face headwinds from sluggish demand and shifting trade policies. That doesn't indicate relief from the excess capacity on the road that has suppressed rates for nearly 3 years now. They shared some numbers on that, but in short, the truckload rate per mile index is just 6% above the baseline from back in 2018. So if you're just 6% above 2018, even with inflation is pretty historically low now at 3% or 4%, that's 3 or 4% per year. So 6% total since 2018 is not enough to keep up. One note, though, from our interview that we did just prior with Frank Kenney, he had mentioned there's a new policy about non-domiciled CDLs that doesn't allow drivers with commercial driver's licenses to operate on American roads if they don't have a U.S. address. He said that could end up taking some capacity off the road for trucks, and with less capacity, that might help bump rates up a little bit. So there are a lot of moving parts here. That was an interesting new variable to track. So we'll continue to keep an eye on it.
We certainly will. And yeah, it's just, I don't see the the uncertainty really removing itself from the market, I think this is something that everybody's going to have to flex with over the next few months at least.
We've been sure hearing that uncertainty word a lot. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
We encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. Also, check out the podcast notes section for some direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today. And we'd like to thank Frank Kenney of Cleo for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And a reminder, Logistics Matters is sponsored by Duravant Integrated Solutions. Duravant Integrated Solutions brings precision and efficiency to every stage of your operation. Leveraging equipment from 4 leading brands, FMH Conveyors, QC Conveyors, NPI Sorters, and WolfTech, they streamline handling, routing, and sorting systems that help your warehouse or distribution center achieve peak performance every step of the way. Check them out at duravant.com. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.